Hello there and welcome back to Forza Top Gear Labs Rivals, the spin-off where we pit a couple of cars with common ground and close PIs against each other to see which one comes out on top. Today we focus on two German saloon cars with an incredibly rare number of cylinders, 10. Firstly, perhaps one of the most well-known 10-cylinder cars ever, the BMW M5 chassis code E60, sold between 2005 and 2010. While it's certainly well known, and indeed well regarded these days as one of the top sports sedans, when it came out reviewers were less enthusiastic. Firstly, it was ugly, like very ugly, especially compared to the very handsome previous E39 generation of 5 Series. BMW was looking to radically change up its styling at the time, and well, they did. Many consider the E60 to have aged well, and to be a good looking car now. I still really don't see it. Next up, the SMG gearbox. An F1 developed 7-speed single-clutch semi-automatic gearbox, which at the time of its introduction felt bad. Being jerky and not massively smooth, still, in the car's M mode, it was better, with shifts completed in a claimed 65 milliseconds, but it was a transmission so bad the Americans were offered a 6-speed manual as standard. And finally, iDrive. An early attempt at infotainment which, in the spirit of even modern day infotainment, aimed to make simple tasks a lot harder than they needed to be. But even all this cannot detract from the incredible S85 5-litre V10 engine which revved to 7,750 RPM and was never available anywhere else. A glorious engine with a fantastic sound and widely considered to be one of the greatest BMW engines ever, when it worked. Typical BMW reliability aside, while I may not see its appeal, the E60 ended up in many hearts and stands as an unfortunate victim of modern necessities, as the replacement M5 was whittled back down to 8 cylinders only. Its rival for today may be lesser known, but it really shouldn't be, the Audi RS6 Saloon chassis code C6 Type 4F, sold between 2008 and 2010. It might surprise you to learn that this model of the RS6 had a V10, but it certainly did, and what a V10 it was. The Audi 5-litre V10 bi-turbo engine, not massively unlike the 5-litre V10 in the original Lamborghini Gallardo. However, with those twin turbos it produced more power than even the most powerful Lamborghini Gallardo ever, meaning it easily eclipsed the power of the M5's engine, with 70 more horsepower and 111 more foot-pounds of torque. The RS6 utilised the ever-present Quattro all-wheel drive system and was mated to a 6-speed ZF Tiptronic gearbox. It wasn't just mechanicals where it had the edge. Thanks to a newer design, the RS6 benefited from an easy-to-use and not all-encompassing infotainment centre. Even in just 3 years, technology can make huge leaps. Unlike the M5, press reviews were very positive for the RS6 on launch, praising its power plant and ease of daily use, although some were critical of the less involving drive than rivals like the aforementioned M5, E63 and the XFR. These days, in typical German fashion, reliability isn't all rosy, but the engine and gearbox have gained a reputation for durability, even if the RS6 loves to munch on tyres and brake pads. Much like the E60, the glorious V10 engine made way for a return to 8 cylinders with the wagon-only version of the next generation RS6. Although it was faster, it had less power than the V10, marking the end of the glorious V10 Audi Saloon. So, there you go, two 10-cylinder saloon cars. While unfortunately, the soundtrack of the V10 is scarce these days, with the retirement and cancellation of most 10-cylinder cars, you'll get to enjoy the glorious sounds of these bygones as they take on the track. First up was the 2009 BMW M5, a 500 horsepower, 383 foot-pound torque, 4,012 pounds of weight. As we sort of mentioned in the intro, the Audi is up on power and it is up on torque compared to the BMW. The BMW is the lighter car here today, so that's the way that's going to work. The scripted intro may have made it seem like I'm not a huge fan of this car, and it's quite right, to be honest with you. I'm really not a fan of the E60. I do think it is not a particularly good looking car, and I'm not a huge fan of the iDrive and the SMG gearbox. This for me is sort of when BMW turned from that sort of cool brand that they were in the 90s, making these stylish, sleek cars that put fear into you everywhere you saw them, into more of a sort of mundane brand for people who are bellends, basically. Anyways, as far as the M5 goes to drive, it is a very weird car, this one. it's sensitive and it feels heavy and light at the same time. Like, it turns in well, like you can feel the weight in it, but it's very sensitive, which makes it feel lighter, so, you know, you can throw the rear end around by not doing a whole much. It's a really weird car to drive, this one. I'd say drive it yourself and try and figure it out yourself. I couldn't get a feel for the M5, yeah, very awkward driving car to say the least. Next up, the 2009 Audi RS6, 570 horsepower, 478 foot-pounds torque, 4,376 pounds of weight. As I mentioned, more powerful than the BMW, torquier than BMW, and heavier than the BMW on account of that all-wheel drive system that this car has. I've got to be honest, I was looking forward to driving the RS6. I do quite like this car. It makes an absolutely fantastic noise. I'm not a massive fan of the way it looks. Audis are kind of and I've always thought the A6 is kind of one of the weaker looking Audis of the bunch. But yeah, I can't ignore that V10 engine. And now, if you want my opinion, I think this is the best sounding car here today, not the M5. However, this one I was actually disappointed by, more disappointed than I was with the BMW. This is a really awkward car to drive. It's very understeer heavy. There is a lot of understeer. Maybe you'd expect that from a 570 horsepower all-wheel drive car, but I kind of expected better from the Audi. That being said, these big Audis can be a bit weird. I drove the latest model of the RS6, the RS6 Avant, around here a good couple of months ago or so, and that was a really awkward car that I couldn't get to grips with. And this was the same. To be honest with you, I think I enjoyed driving the BMW more, because yeah, this was just disheartening. Really not a good car to drive. These big Audis do have issues, which is a bit of a shame really, but that's the way the cookie crumbles sometimes. Onto the times, and the BMW was actually the quickest car today, going into 151st place with a 122.205, but the RS6 was not too far behind, in 135th place with a 122.285. So yeah, there really is not much in between those two cars. There's a couple of cars sort of in between both of them, the M4, the Maloo, and the Commodore, all of which are better driving. Yeah, kind of surprised the M5 beat out the M4, but then again, I guess the RS6 beat out the RS5, which is sort of the M4 competitor, which is interesting. Yeah, today, two cars that didn't drive massively well. They made great noises, do not get me wrong, but, yeah, I can't really recommend either of them, to be honest with you. The M5's not a particularly nice car to drive, and neither's the RS6. I'd probably still have the RS6 for the soundtrack, the fact that it's better looking, and the fact that it's more interesting from a technological standpoint, and also it won't explode every 5 minutes, but yeah, still a bit disheartening. Anyways, thank you all very much for watching this edition of Forza Top Gear Laps Rivals. If you have ideas for rival showdowns you'd like to see, comment down below, or full episodes. I'm open to either of your suggestions. And yeah, thank you all very much for watching. Join us for the full episode on Tuesday, where I'm going to be covering modern sports saloons. And join us for the next Rivals episode, when we're going to be taking a look at a couple more German rivals. But this next showdown should be a little bit more different. Let's go with that. Join me for that. Until then, farewell.
Ведь у меня есть черный бумер, он всегда со мной. Ведь у меня есть черный бумер, быстрый и шальной. Ведь у меня есть черный бумер, бумер заводной. Садись